Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my usual co-hosts.
I'm Jeffrey Poole. And I'm Joe Lallo.
Joe muted himself and forgot that they are now introducing themselves in the introduction. But that's okay. And we have a great guest for you this week. He has been here two times before. This is his third appearance, Chris Fox. And even when he's not on the show, people refer to him. So you should all know him by now. But in case you don't know him, he is, I'd say, most popular or most well known in the indie community for his books, his nonfiction books, 5,000 Words an Hour and Writing to Market. And he also writes science fiction, and he used his Deathless series as kind of a learning experience, I believe, and really put everything he knew into action last year with his Void Wraith trilogy. He's currently writing a new trilogy in 12 weeks, and we'll be talking to him about how to do that. And he's also the author of Six Figure Author, and we're going to ask him some questions about that too. It's where he's talking about using data to sell books. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having me back on. It's good to see you guys.
Thanks. It's good to have you. I think you may be our first three-peat guest. So just in case you want to feel honored, that would be appropriate.
I will make myself a title belt.
Excellent. Well, it's been about a year since last we spoke on here. So, at that time you were in the middle of publishing your Void Wraith trilogy. And since then you've put out the Six Figure Author book. So do you want to kind of catch us up on how the year has been going and maybe what you've learned since then?
Sure. It's been a great year. So I did something kind of unique for me. Normally I'm looking for more work and more things that I can do, but I got married back in October. And so what I did is I kind of took like a month and a half off leading to the wedding. After the wedding, I didn't spend a lot of time writing. And then when I did start writing, I worked on a non-written to market book. So it was the fourth book of my Deathless series. And I knew I wasn't going to sell a ton of copies, but I just really wanted to write it. So effectively, I took almost 6 months off from the hardcore writing and cranking out a lot of books. My thought being that I had just published this trilogy. It was doing really well. I had some money in the bank. So, take some time off and enjoy myself. And it did a lot to recharge me. But come the spring, I was starting to feel kind of antsy, like I haven't done anything in a while, and I sort of want to jump into a new project. And I knew the best way to make myself accountable would be to record myself and put videos up there saying I was going to get hit certain word counts. So I created 12 weeks to a trilogy, which is something I've seen a lot of people do. Tons of people are cranking out books very quickly. And there's not a lot that's unique to my spin on it, just that I'm sort of documenting the process.
Awesome. Well, we've often advised people on here, if you can hold back and launch with like 3 books, especially as a newer author or starting in a new genre, it's probably going to be very helpful and easier to market. So I guess we'll ask you, how's it going so far? You're kind of in the middle of it now, aren't you?
I am. I just finished up the second book, so I've still got one full book to write. I will finish the edits on book 2 probably in the next 4 or 5 days and then move into the third book. And I'm in week 8 of my trilogy, so I got about 4 weeks to finish. So I think I should finish a week or 2 early.
Excellent. And I don't know if we've talked about it before, but I saw you had a video on your site kind of talking about the advantages of doing the back-to-back writing. What have you discovered? How has it been helpful?
It's just been amazing. I had first heard about this when Michael Sullivan was talking about writing his, I think it's pronounced Riria Chronicles, but I could be wrong. And he wrote the entire series. So it's a long-standing, like 5 or 6 book series set in his fantasy universe. And one of the advantages he said he had found is that, you sort of know a lot more about the characters in the early books, and that richness comes through when you take the time to write the later books first. And this was the first time I had an opportunity to do that. So last year when I wrote Destroyer, I only had what I had written for Destroyer. I wrote it really quick. There was no additional context. And this time around, in writing the second book and working my way through the third book, the first book has already become much, much stronger because I have a better idea of what the universe is. I've done a lot more world building. I've fleshed out more characters in book 2, and that kind of shines through in book 1 when I go back and do the editing. So I think as long as I can keep writing as fast as I do, I will never go back to just putting out the first book in a series again. I'll always do at least 2 or 3. I just feel like you get a much better product, and of course you get that momentum when you release.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I did it the first time with my pen name books. I decided to write the first 3. I was mostly thinking so I can launch and I had nothing going with the pen name. It was anonymous. But I was the same way. I found that when I was writing book 2, I kept thinking of details I could go back and add to book 1, especially as far as the world building, because I always do that on the fly. So yeah, I agree. I recommend to people, if if it's not taking you 7 years to write a novel, like some of us took our first one, like our first one might have taken that long, then it definitely seems better, especially for those in fantasy and science fiction, where we often do write the big series that goes over many books. All right, you mentioned that you just published a new Deathless book, even though you're kind of the right to market guy, and you've talked about before how that series wasn't written to market the way your space opera was, or military sci-fi, I guess it is. Were you just doing it for fun, or are you still experimenting around with that, or what's
Well,
going
I
on there?
promised the people that had read the first 3 books that I was going to put out more books, and a lot of them were starting to feel kind of abandoned because it had been a full year since I put out a book in that series. So I just said to myself, you know what, I'm doing well enough financially that even though this isn't the smartest decision for me to do, I love this series. I love writing in this world. It's fun for me. And the whole reason I became a full-time author was sort of so that I could tell these stories that I have. So I kind of took a chance and wrote it knowing it wasn't in the short term going to pay for itself, but long term it'll make a profit. It's already, paid off its production costs. So it's not making money like Destroyer made money, but it'll make a little bit of money, and I'll feel better knowing that I kind of lived up to what the fans were asking.
All right, cool. And it sounds like I agree. That's a good idea to take breaks and write stuff that, or maybe have a wedding, take a vacation now and then. I feel like if you are just constantly trying to hit the tropes and do what the market expects, and maybe if you're publishing quickly, you can easily get burned out. And, we're all hoping we can do this for the next 50 years or whatever. All right.
Yeah,
Well, let me
likewise.
pass. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was saying likewise. Yeah, I hope we can do this for the next 50 years, and I think that sustaining that kind of longevity does require that you write in different genres when you feel like writing in different genres, and just sort of force yourself to adhere to a market every time you put out a book.
All right, cool. I'm going to pass you to the guys for a few more questions, and then we'll kind of interrogate you on using the data and doing better on Amazon.
Yep. All right. So my first trilogy was actually a single massive story that I broke into 3 parts. If people tend to write long, do you think that splitting the first book into multiple volumes is potentially a good idea in order to sort of adapt their writing style to this technique?
You certainly can, but if you're going for Kindle Unlimited, Kindle Unlimited readers love long books, and so I don't think you have to. So you could get away with 3 really large books, or even putting it all out as one book, and people would probably go for it. But by breaking it into more books, you're likely to make more profit, because I think you could charge the same price point for a lower word count. So if, let's say, book 1 was 120,000 words, you might be able to get away with making it 2 60,000 word books and putting it out like that.
Right. Naturally, you adapt the plot appropriately so there's an intelligent division point.
Right, that's the assumption. Now, you definitely would need to make it fit the shorter books.
Yeah. All right. And if someone's already a pro author and they've got some series going, do you think that there's value in splitting one's attention between a current series and getting a new series going? Or is it better to stay focused on a single project at a time and just sort of hope you can get it done quickly enough to capitalize?
I think there's advantages both ways. So if you have multiple series going, you're going to be able to kind of fall back on another series when the first one ends. You can test the market and see what's popular, so that when you finish your first kind of flagship series, it's easy for you to transition into something else you wrote that is definitely popular. And so that's a great advantage. But I also think, if you're doing the Michael Anderle thing, where you're just cranking book after book out in the same series, you can build up an enormous amount of momentum doing that. So both of them are intelligent in their own way. I'm not married to either route. In the past, I've always done multiple series, but I think this time around, I'm going to put out 4 or 5 books a row in the same one.
Yeah, I can definitely see the value in that. Like, and especially if you are a slower writer, then focusing on a single series is the really only way to maintain a reasonable momentum of releases within a single thread.
Agreed.
Well, that's all I have for this section, so I'll hand you off to Jeff for the last few.
All right, let's see. My first question is, we need to set the scene here. As someone with multiple titles and several fantasy series and 1 mystery series, I'm always struggling to come up with the names for the characters, and I've oftentimes asked the fans for help. You've mentioned that character names are important, possibly more so than most authors are led to believe. Would you care to expand on that?
Sure. So for a lot of readers, especially people who are kind of new to it and are just sort of starting to explore, it can be really confusing when you have a array of characters to learn. The larger a cast of characters, especially in things like epic fantasy, I'll use like The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan as an example. You get to a point where it's really hard as the reader to track all the very similar names. And so one of the things that you can do when naming characters in a series, I usually, the last step after I've written a book is go back and look at the names, and I'll just do a search and replace if I feel like two of the names are too similar. So you're looking for the same hard consonant sounds, the same endings to various names. You know, if you have like Aranthar and, Lilithar, two names like that, you want to make sure they're not too similar. And I think that doing that makes it easier for readers to ground themselves in the series because different characters are a little bit more distinct. And if you have too many similar or too many long names, you're going to run into that kind of reader fatigue where sometimes people will put your series down and look for something simpler.
Yeah, that's true. I usually will, like I say, I usually ask fans for help because it's a good way to get them involved, and I can have a little credit page back at the end saying, "Hey, I use this character from this, so thanks for the names," that sort of thing. But I always have to make sure it's something that I think would sound good in the series there, and not this is just because it's something that they add like 3 different apostrophes in the same word and they think it sounds cool. It doesn't always work that way. But,
right. I know another author who removed all the vowels from his character names.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, see my next question here. Accountability. You've stressed the importance of it in your writing. Can you explain what you mean by that? And I ask that just as you take a drink.
So accountability, I did a video about this recently in the series, the 12 Weeks to a Trilogy. It's hard, really, to get your butt into the chair every day consistently and crank out the words that you said you're going to crank out. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is through accountability. You can say that you want to write some books. I hear this from people all the time where they'll hear I'm doing another challenge and they'll say I'm going to do one too. And then there's very little follow through. And that's because they're not really erecting any sort of accountability around their actions. One thing that I do expressly to make sure that I keep writing is putting out these videos. When you know that you're going to put out a video every week and you're going to have to say to people, hey, either I hit my word counts or I didn't, it kind of puts that pressure into place. And so maybe you have a Facebook group of writers that you post to and you're saying, hey guys, I'm going to write 25,000 words this week, or whatever your goal happens to be. Telling other people can help you stay accountable. And, having discipline yourself, saying to yourself each day, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It doesn't matter if I missed a day writing. Today, I'm going to hit that goal that I have set for myself because when I wake up tomorrow, I want to be proud of what I did the day before. And if you do that enough days in a row, you find that you're cranking out quite a few books.
Yeah, it sounds like almost the same thing as like if you brag what you're going to do in the next week, and then you're going to have to be faced with the consequences if you didn't follow through with that. So,
exactly.
Got it. All right. Let's see. Those are my questions there. Let me hand you back over to Lindsay. We can ask you some more about launching a book on Amazon.
All right. Sounds like those diet programs where you're supposed to tell people you're having a diet so that they will stop you from eating the donuts. I don't know. Sounds more appealing than those programs, I guess.
Slightly, but not too much. I mean, it's still a lot of work.
All right. So as somebody who's about to launch a new series, I, of course, want to ask you, what are you planning to do to launch your new trilogy?
So not a lot that's different, just more refinement. I have a much larger mailing list than I did last year. That helps a lot. I am dropping the books really close together. This is based on things that I've seen, like Isaac Hook did it, you did it. Putting out those first 3 books within a couple of weeks seems like a route to traction. I'm doing an enormous ad spend both on Amazon and Facebook. I'll probably lose some money there, but it'll get more exposure initially. And I wrote a reader magnet, as I always do for my series, which I'm giving away on InstaFreebie. I've got some Facebook ads running. And all it's doing is giving them the reader magnet and getting their email addresses so that when the book launches, the first one, I can say, to however X number of 1,000 email addresses I've gathered, hey guys, this book's out, it's 99 cents, and hopefully see some conversion. So it's really about getting as many eyes on the first book as I can, discounting it to 99 cents, just like I did with Destroyer, and trying to sell as many copies as possible.
So you sound a little more high speed than I am, or than I will in actuality be, because I think it's going to be about a month before the 3rd one is out. But so you're using InstaFreebie this time. Is that going to be kind of a prequel novella type of thing?
It is. So it ends exactly as the first novel starts. So you've got my main characters that are coming into the plot and they're landing on this planet where they're going to be trapped. And then the prequel novella is about an alien ally that they meet through the plot and how he ended up on this planet. So I wanted to give, just like I did on Exiled, something really important to the plot behind the lines. So if you read behind the lines, you're curious about this character, you want to know who he is and why he's there, and hopefully that'll entice people to download and read that story, which will get them on my mailing list.
All right, and that's different from last year, isn't it? Did you just do your prequel to the people who actually signed up for your mailing list, like, and found out about it through the books?
I did, and I learned kind of the hard way. I made a mistake. So I put it in the books. I got a ton of signups. For the first month, I was getting probably 30 a day. And then I listed the book on Amazon, and it dropped overnight to 10 a day because all of a sudden people could just buy the book for $1 instead of giving up an email address. And so that's what they chose to do. This time around, I'm never going to put the reader magnet on Amazon. I will always use it exclusively on the mailing list just to get those signups.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually watched what you did, and then I kept the prequel as only for my mailing list subscribers last year with my last series, and it worked really well. And I continued to get signups, as long as the books were doing well. And this year I'm pretty much going to do the same thing. I did finally take that prequel and put it together in a box set, but only because I'm moving into a new series and I'm going to have a new giveaway for the mailing list.
Smart. And it's encouraging to hear that it worked well.
Yes. And InstaFreebie, are you doing a separate mailing list for those people than from the people who have already read and bought your books?
I am. It'll be entirely separate. I suspect I'll have a really high unsubscribe rate, as so many people do when they use the service. But I can convert anybody who wants to buy the book over to my main list, and I'll take whoever I can get.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing that too. Just everybody, same thing, I don't want to mingle them in with the regular mailing list, but hey, if you can snag even like a 10th of those people, why not give it a try?
Yeah, and I've got a simple autoresponder sequence. So right after they join the list, it'll tell them, hey, here's the main book you can buy, and here's some other series that I do. It'll reach out to them in 3 months, and then again in 6 months. And if they haven't signed up at that point, it'll invite them to unsubscribe, and they kind of have to take action if they want to stay on the list at that point.
All right, sounds like a good plan. You'll have to let us know how it works. I've heard from people who swear by InstaFreebie and getting mailing list signups that way, and others that have found that it just wasn't worth the cost of having them on the mailing list. So I guess it depends.
Yeah, I've heard both ways. I'm curious myself. I don't have any data yet, but I'd be happy to present it once I do.
All right. Yeah, it might depend on like how good of a hook your, whatever you gave away is too, and how much it draws them into the other books. All right. So you mentioned that you're going to do Facebook ads and Amazon ads. How are you finding those right now for actually selling books? And hopefully, you mentioned you'd be okay losing a little money with your launch, and I'm kind of the same way. But after the launch, I'd want them to be, not losing money. What are your thoughts on Amazon and Facebook right now?
They're expensive. They're getting saturated. You've got Mark Dawson teaching a course on it, and it's not the first go round. You've got tons of people that know the ads are working. So we have quite literally hundreds of authors in every genre that are now bidding on these keywords. So when I started, there'd be like a page or two of people advertising on some of the larger books, and now it's like 25 pages of ads. So it can get really expensive really quickly. You sort of have to choose between, do I want a lot of impressions, but I pay a lot for them? Or, do I want profitability? So on a lot of my ads, especially those that have been running for a while, I'll reduce the bid a lot, and I'll put a lot less into it. But I also see a correspondingly lower amount of sales. For a new release, if I'm willing to put that bid way up there, I'm going to lose some money just because, even if people are buying the book, not enough of them are when you're paying $2 a click. But that's worth it because you're getting that exposure early on. So for like the first week or two of a launch, I'm willing to sort of sacrifice that. Afterwards, it's getting harder and harder to make your ads sustainable and actually make money on them. But I feel like it's something we really have to master as authors, and going forward, it's going to get more and more valuable.
Yeah, I was surfing around Amazon the other day, and I came across a book that had 123 pages of, like the ads they show underneath also bots. I was like, who is going to flip through these? Are you doing let's see, there's different, like there's the product placement ads and then the search results kind of thing. Which ones are you finding most profitable?
I try both. I'm kind of taking Mark Dawson's advice there, and I'm testing constantly. So I put a new crop of 5 ads usually every single day, and I kill an average of 3 to 4 of them by the next couple of days once some data has reported in. So some of them work better with different keywords. The 150 plus characters you've got for the description matters a lot. What you say there is going to determine really how many clicks you're getting. but I don't know. I would hesitate to say that I'm good at Amazon ads. I turn a very small profit when I put attention on it, but it takes a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, I haven't even tried it for about 6 months, given him a break. But now that I have the new series coming out and it's a spinoff of the old series, I'm kind of motivated to give it all a try again and see if I can get more people into both series. Now, Facebook, I've heard, is even, people saying is even more saturated, and it's just you're having to pay so much. Are you having any luck there?
I am. The trick to Facebook, in my experience, has been it doesn't work for me, at least in any great quantity. I had a few sales here and there, but it didn't really work for me until I had a large mailing list I could use as a lookalike audience. So when I could tell Facebook, okay, look at these 2,000 people and then 4,000, and it keeps getting larger, and find other people like them, now I tend to get decent cost per click, and my ads do all right. So I'm actually doing a little better on Facebook right now than I am on Amazon for the first time.
Oh, that sounds encouraging then, since I'm going to be jumping into it too with the science fiction. Yeah, I liked the lookalike audience when I actually, for the science fiction list for me, I actually have that's what they're there for, only the sci-fi books. And then I have my regular list that you can sign up for on my website. And since I started out talking about self-publishing and all sorts of things, I would say that's a less precise, targeted audience.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way. My very first list for Deathless was a mix of writers and people who like werewolves. And so when I tried to use that list as a lookalike audience, it did not go well.
Well, you mentioned in your six-figure author book, well, I guess in the subtitle, it says using data to sell books. Could you talk about what you mean by that?
Sure. So the way that it works on Amazon, they are a massive sales engine. And their whole goal is to sell products, as many products as possible, to people who actually want to buy them. So anytime somebody goes to a page on Amazon, even just to look at it, they click through and put it in their cart, but maybe don't buy it. They actually buy it. They click on Kindle Unlimited. All these things, these metrics are being tracked. And what they're trying to do over time is aggregate all this data and use data science to kind of massage it, look for patterns, and figure out who is most likely to buy something. So they may figure that men between 40 and 45 living on the East Coast who have purchased this product, and this product are the most likely to buy your book. And as soon as Amazon figures that out, they're going to show everybody that they think will buy it your book. And based on what happens then, if a bunch of people buy it, they're going to be eager to show it again. So you can really kind of train Amazon to sell your book if you're carefully targeting the books that you want your book to be associated with.
And we talked about whether an audience that we've cultivated is really targeted or not. Can you talk about, I've heard you say this on other shows, but just in case not everybody is listening to every podcast, sort of like how you might mess things up with the algorithms if you just throw in, your self-publishing authors and your fantasy fans and everything at maybe your military sci-fi.
Yeah, I love this story. It's from early in the book, and it was a hard lesson for me. But when I first started publishing, like every author out there, I told my mom, I told my friends, I told my coworkers, hey guys, I've got a book out. And what happens when you do this, and many of us have seen this, the most visible way to know that you screwed up is when you go to your also bought books and you see cookbooks and you see romance novels on your space opera and you see Westerns and you see a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't belong there. And that's a very visible way to see what's happening under the hood. So the phrase that I use is a sale is not just a sale, it's a data point. So every time you sell a book, Amazon is looking to see who you sold it to and what else they bought. If you sell to a bunch of hardcore science fiction fans who love what you're selling, then Amazon very quickly figures out how to find similar people. But if some of your fans are your mom and your Aunt Judy and, the guy that you cook with at work, and the only thing that they have in common is you, then you've got some serious problems because Amazon has no idea what the commonality is, and they're just going to throw their hands up and stop trying to peddle your book. So having a couple of hundred sales early on in your book is almost always a good thing, but if they're to the wrong people, it can really hurt your forward momentum as an author.
Do you feel for maybe someone like me who writes fantasy and science fiction and then the science fiction romance under the pen name, would you say that it's good? And, in my case, I've split off the list, but let's say someone hasn't. Would you say like hold off and don't even announce the book to your list at first and maybe try to use ads to get those targeted readers?
That's typically what I do if I don't feel like I have an audience that fits. So when I put out Destroyer, for example, I didn't tell my list during the first week. I didn't want them to know until after my also bot had sort of sorted out. So at that point, like after a week, then I announced it and I told my Deathless list, hey guys, I've got some science fiction out. But I was really careful in the first week not to pull that lever, not to tell every person that I could, because I wanted to make sure I was telling the right people. And that ended up working really well and keeping the book kind of in front of the audience that I wanted to be in front of. That said, if your audience is large enough and the series that you're writing are adjacent, so let's say fantasy and science fiction, you stand a high likelihood of getting people from Group A to buy Group B books. So like Glenn Stewart was on the show recently. He's got urban fantasy that his science fiction fans are buying because they like his style and because he's got magic in some of his sci-fi already. So, they sort of self-select themselves as people that are into that. It can be a great thing to let everybody know if you've got a large enough audience of people that will sort of take a chance with you like they will with, say, Brandon Sanderson. Otherwise, if you want to play it safe, then maybe splitting those lists off is a good idea and saving the people who aren't in your central genre, the target audience, saving them until after a point where your book sort of found its place in the rankings.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know, I could see waiting like a couple weeks with my stuff. For instance, I'll probably let the people who are on the fantasy kind of general list know eventually. But in the beginning, there's always the hope that, yeah, this will get in the also bots of other similar types of space opera books out there. Of course, eventually my stuff ends up being all smushed together, and there's the pen name stuff, the naughty pen name stuff, and with the other stuff. And I feel bad when I'm in an anthology with someone or something, and of course I promote it to my list, and here's this fantasy box set or anthology with my smutty space opera sci-fi romance and the also bots. I'm like, oh, sorry, that was my fault. But hey, at least we sold some books. All right. Now, for those of us, or whoever's listening and only maybe has a couple books out or doesn't have a very big list yet, how would you recommend finding that targeted audience to try to peddle the book to in the first couple weeks?
Well, I'll be honest, it's getting harder and harder to do this because many of the genres are getting very crowded. So if at all possible, I look for a genre that isn't being overrun by indie authors. Science fiction's getting super, super crowded. Yeah, that's partially my fault. Sorry, guys. Fantasy has always been crowded. Urban fantasy is getting more crowded every day and harder to break into. So if you can find a smaller genre, it'll be easier for you to get that traction. I don't see a lot of people writing different types of thrillers. If you want to do, like, say, an archaeological thriller, there might be a little room there if you do some research. And I think that's probably the first biggest step to a new author getting the traction they want to get. But if you decide that you want to write urban fantasy and you're going to try and fit in there, start scoping for authors who have the kind of success that you're after and try and introduce yourself to them and just be, humble and be honest and say, hey, listen, guys, this is what I want to do. What do you think of my blurb? What do you think of the cover? What do you think of the launch plan? And try to get some help in figuring out sort of what they do and what sort of audience they're after. And, from there, make sure that you're reading the bestsellers in the genre because that's who your target audience is reading.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be pretty tough for a newer author to jump into military sci-fi for some reason now. Urban fantasy, and it's hard because you can sell a lot of books potentially if you do well. Same with urban fantasy, but there is a lot of competition. And I've noticed that in fantasy, they've just added some new categories in the last year. So like if I was starting from scratch right now, I would do a military fantasy. That's kind of up my alley, and they just added that category. I think you have to email to get listed in it. But there's a couple like that. So if you're out there still looking for your little niche.
Yeah, my ears perked up. Military fantasy, I'm on board. I'll read that.
Yeah, I loved those Glenn Cook Black Company books back in the day.
Likewise.
But yeah, I looked at that category just the other day, and it doesn't take very much at all to get in the top 100, probably because I think you have to email and ask to get in it.
Right, and I'm sure that'll change over time. It's always changing. But yeah, for now, that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, and we've had the guys on talking about the lit RPG too. It seems like another category that's got a really hungry audience, if that happens to be your thing and you can write books like that. I don't think there's a category on Amazon yet, but they're lobbying for it.
I would take great care with lit RPG. I am an avid World of Warcraft player. I played MMOs for most of my adult life. I know video games backwards and forwards. I've read a lot of lit RPG, and what I'm seeing is a lot of authors getting into lit RPG because they hear that it's hot. but they have no idea what a lit RPG is. And so they put out their book and it says, a lit RPG saga in the title, and then the lit RPG fans get their hands on it and they're just destroying these people in reviews.
That is a danger for sure. Yeah, I've played a lot of those games growing up and fairly recently. And I once we interviewed the fellow that, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but he was on a few months ago, and all the rules that apparently people, the readers want to see in it, like they want tables and they want the stats spelled out. I was like, oh, I am definitely not writing one of these. All right, last question for me. You mentioned in your email that you're writing a new book coming up here in May or so about relaunching novels. We can definitely plug it when it's actually out, but can you give us a little teaser and maybe tell us a couple things people can do if they want to relaunch one that hasn't been selling well?
Absolutely. So the title is Relaunch Your Novel, Breathe Life into Your Backlist. And what I'm doing is a mixture of case studies of people who have successfully relaunched series and kind of what they did. And then also some experiments I'm running on my own. And I guess the first thing to look at is sort of what your goal is. So when you say relaunch a novel, a lot of people have some very different ideas. Some people think that you need to re-edit the book, buy some new covers, totally change your image, redo your blurbs, and then relist it as all new books and publish the old ones. And that definitely can work. That is a way to relaunch, but there's also lighter weight relaunches that are easier to do. So for example, what I'm doing with Deathless right now is they don't scream the right genre. I have covers that have, werewolves and zombies and vampires. And if you look at what's hot in urban fantasy right now, that's not at all what I'm seeing. My covers are not on point. So I'm releasing a box set and I'm using a cover that will fit very much in the urban fantasy genre, will look much more similar to the other covers in that genre to see how it does. So relaunching your novel can mean a lot of different things. There are a lot of experiments that are going to be covered in the book. And kind of as a new author, you can take a look and mix and match a la carte what you want to do for your relaunch. The whole goal of the book is to teach you the advantages and disadvantages of all the various tactics you can do, and then allow you to cobble together what's going to fit your book.
Cool. I was excited to hear you were doing one on that because I keep saying I'm going to get a VA someday and, or author assistant, whatever, and have them just try to market the backlist books because I'm horrible. I started a new series and I just whatever, the old series, I'll try to get a book club once in a while, but that's the extent of my marketing. And I know I'm leaving money on the table, and this way I can just hand them your book and say, read this and let's do this.
That's the goal.
You do it. All right. Well, let me pass you to the guys for a few more questions.
All right. So my first question is, naturally, you've illustrated that researching the market and writing a book to suit it is a winning strategy to make a book that will sell. But do you think there's a market for every book? Like if you do enough research and target and find out the right targeting, is it possible to get a foothold for any story that's engaging and well written enough?
Almost any. So I would have the caveat of that there's going to be some exceptions. You may not be able to find an audience for every story, but most stories you can, I guess, optimize them in such a way that the cover kind of screams what the genre is. So maybe you've got a genre bending space science fantasy kind of book, and it's got a unique proposition and it doesn't really fit into any one genre, and you've got some thriller elements. A book like that might succeed. I think that I'll bring up Michael Anderle again, his Kutherian Gambit. It doesn't really fit into any one genre very closely, but it's enormously popular because it is well written. So you can succeed with a book that is not written to market. I see it happen all the time. But if you're going to do that, one of the big advantages you should kind of milk is making sure that your cover screams the elements of your particular book, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if nothing else, you want your cover to be representative of the content of the book, because I know that there's nothing worse than making a cover that really appeals to a certain audience that will then not find the elements that would appeal to them within the book itself. Like you can get good sales on your first week and then bad reviews for the rest of the book's life if you pull a stunt like that.
Yeah, you will pay a price if you bait and switch.
Yeah. All right, so we're talking about algorithms. Algorithms can and do change frequently. How wise is it to cater one's promotional tactics to the way algorithms currently work? And how frequently should you reassess how the algorithms seem to be behaving?
I reassess constantly. So every time I release a new book, I'm always looking to see how tactics have changed. If I'm trying the same tactics I'll see if they're more or less effective than last time around. If I'm doing new tactics, I'll take a good look at them and see how they perform in that launch. It's literally changing daily. They can push a patch whenever they want to their servers to change how their data science is working, and we'll never know. So I assume that it's always changing. I don't tailor my promotions usually to take advantage of the algorithms, because you can't really know exactly how they're going to work. So you can do some good general rules of thumb, like, you know, building kind of a launch tail after, say, a book bub is a good idea. But beyond that, I don't put as much time into the nitty gritty of when promotions are run as much as I do making sure that the only promotions I run are aimed at the right audience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially because by their very nature, like the retailers are hiding what their algorithm is, because the last thing they want is someone to figure out how to effectively game the algorithm.
Yeah, especially if you're Amazon, that's a huge risk for them.
Yeah. All right. So back-to-back releases. We talked a little bit about this, but they're clearly an effective way to launch. What do you think is the ideal spacing between releases?
I have a theory, but I don't know for sure. So I've watched Lindsay's release. Isaac Hook just did this back in February, and I've seen a few others recently. Most people seem to be doing book one, and then either a day or up to a week later, book two launches, and then 2 to 3 weeks after that, book three is coming out. I think whatever staggering you can arrange that's going to work, as long as the first two books are out really quickly, will probably work for you. So book one and two as close together as you can get them, book three as fast as you can, and after that, you could probably slow down a little bit.
Okay, and like, what would you say is a good minimum and maximum number of titles? It seems like 3 is a good rule of thumb for the rapid release, but like, what's the maximum number of books you should have in the hopper ready for rapid release?
I know it's not a great answer, but as many as you can. So I have a friend that's got 4 books across a couple of different series that are all coming out within 2 weeks of each other. So she'll do a release, 2 weeks, a release, 2 weeks, a release, 2 weeks, a release. And I think that's probably going to work really well for her. That's happening next month, so I'll get to see. It really comes down to who your audience is. If you've got a voracious audience of people in Kindle Unlimited, they want to read those books as soon as is humanly possible. And they're going to read as many books as you put out.
Right, that makes sense. More is always better, right? All right, so for authors who've got series in multiple genres, would you consider it a good idea to drop one or more series in order to be able to focus on swifter releases? Or you know, do you continue to have the, like you've said that there's value in having multiple, but is there greater value in focusing and just choosing your most profitable series?
Absolutely. If you're looking to make money at this and you need to get a paycheck, then you should focus and double down in the genre where you're making the most amount of money. In my case, that's not what I did. I wanted to write another series, but I paid a price for that financially. If I was doing the smart thing, if I wanted to make as much money as I could, I would have cranked out a science fiction novel every 6 weeks and just never stopped doing that.
It's amazing how quickly the smart thing becomes the undesirable thing sometimes, just from the point of view of the creator, you know?
Right, right. If we want to keep doing this long term, I think that we have to look after our own creative well. You know, you hear the word recreation. I mean, that's recreation. It's really about getting that energy back. And if you spend all of your time cranking out something, you're going to lose interest in it, you know, eventually, and not want to do it. And I don't want to burn out like that.
Yeah, and if you're not interested in something pretty quickly, other people won't be interested in either because it shows.
Very true. Very true.
All right, so just really one last question before I hand you off to Jeff. Keeping up with the sort of release schedule that gives an author the best, this actually relates to what we just said, that gives the author the best chance of success can be an absolutely punishing endeavor. You talk about taking a break and you know, you talk about making sure you read the most popular books in the genre that you've targeted, but like, what other ways do you use to sort of refuel the creative well and make sure you don't burn out?
I do a lot of nonfiction, so I'll go hiking or I'll be on the treadmill in the morning. I finished up a great courses on ancient Egyptian history that was amazing. I'm reading the 48 Laws of Power right now, which is wonderful. Like, it basically teaches you to think like a villain, so it's great for writing villains. Excuse me. So I try to do as much nonfiction as possible. That really helps. I watch a lot of documentaries, a lot of TV shows. I spend time in nature. I hang out with my wife and family. I play a lot of video games. Not terribly impressed with Mass Effect Andromeda, unfortunately. So I got more writing done because I wasn't playing that. But any activity that you can do that you find enjoyable and teaches you something new, I think, is a way to refill that creative well.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I was people who follow the chat know I been watching the new Mystery Science Theater because I'm a backer and I was able to.
I love
And
that
it's
show.
amazing how many like jotting down like here's a trope I could play with. Oh, here's another one. Like I kind of thought I was wasting my time and not being productive, but I ended up with a sheet full of ideas.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you jar loose when you just sit down to watch some TV.
Yeah, it's always working, you know.
Mhm.
All right, well that's all I've got for this section. I'll hand you off to Jeff for the last few.
Okay, I was just making sure I unmute the right screen here. I've got about 5 different screens all open at the same time here. Okay, my first question was regarding to Amazon ads. You've already covered, so I don't need to worry about that. Okay, I've heard that several of Amazon's algorithms like seeing specific keywords in the book description, sometimes in the book title, and even in the ever so important 7 keywords we choose to categorize our book. What has been your experience with this? Is it really that beneficial to have a properly worded description?
I seriously doubt it. It might make a little bit of difference, and if you're into SEO, then every optimization is probably a good thing. But the amount of difference you're going to see in your sales between a very carefully worded blurb that includes all this stuff in like 2 paragraphs in the bottom, it's probably not going to pull you to the top of search results very easily, especially since Amazons are becoming more prevalent, or Amazon ads are becoming more prevalent. So any search engine optimization you might do through your description is countered by somebody else who is appearing high up on the page because they've got an Amazon ad running. And as more authors have those ads running, SEO will matter less and less.
Okay, so I can stop trying to figure out what the properly phrased description is. That's good. All right. Okay, another question for you. Subtitles. I've heard other authors tell me that it's cool to have like this title here, a new epic fantasy adventure, or using your archaeological thriller you just mentioned. If I happen to write a novel that would fall into this category, would you recommend I put an archaeological thriller under the main title? I mean, does it really matter, or is it harmless in Amazon's point of view?
I think it's mostly harmless. I don't think Amazon's going to give you a hard time for doing it. And depending on the book, it could make sense. If you're writing an epic fantasy, you probably don't need to put that in the title. That's going to be clear to readers when they see your cover. But if you're writing an archaeological thriller, on the other hand, it might be very beneficial to put that in because you're going to have a lot of people who say, oh, that sounds interesting, archaeological thriller. So there can be instances where I think it's useful, but if you're writing in a main genre, like, say, urban fantasy, don't bother.
So it's helpful for aiding the readers figure out just what the kind of book it is. But as far as Amazon's concerned, they couldn't give a rat's patootie.
So far as I know, I mean, if they start giving a rat's ass about it, they're definitely going to tell us. You'll get that threatening email that says, hey, you have to remove this from your book.
All right. Okay. I have a question from a listener, Holly. She asks, can you ask Chris about his covers? Did he get them before he started the challenge? Did he already decide on the title of the books in the trilogy?
I had decided on the title of the first 2 books before I started the challenge. I had commissioned the cover art for the first book, but in the very first video, it goes over what I've got done. And so you can see I've got the artwork for the cover, but I don't have any typography. And so I mocked it up myself, and that's in the video. I have now the cover art for the second book done, but I still haven't done the third book yet. So I'm kind of up against the wall to get this done in time. And this just has to do with how long it took me to find the cover artist and get them working. I was using, as many science fiction authors do, Tom Edwards, but made the mistake of mentioning that on a couple of podcasts, and now Tom Edwards has a 6-month wait list. So I had to scramble a little bit to find an artist who could do what I wanted done, and I'm kind of a little behind. I would much have preferred to have the covers all done ahead of time, and I'm sweating bullets here at the end.
All right, we've got another question from Mark Tyson. Do you think it's possible for the Amazon algorithms to pick up a new book from a lower sales point, like 3 or 4 books a day and increasing?
Absolutely, and I've seen this. So what'll happen, Sever Brony was the first time that I saw this. He writes a middle grade epic fantasy, great series. And the first book, he didn't do anything. He put it up right around the same time I launched my first novel. It was selling 2 to 3 copies a day, and then it was 3 to 4, and then it was 5 to 6. And the next thing you know, this book just takes off at full price, and he's selling 10 copies a day and then 20 copies a day. It's really, really possible for a book to be discovered that way because you've got people in Kindle Unlimited who are desperately looking for something new to read, the same way you're hunting on Netflix, where you want some new series in your favorite genre. And so they're always looking. And Amazon, of course, wants to give those people new books. So when they run out of other books to show that person, because that person isn't going to buy them, they already bought them, eventually, even at 3 or 4 sales a day, they're going to show that person your book. And if enough people like it, it's going to start rising on its own in the rankings.
Very good to know. Mark, I hope that answers your question for you. But all right, that's it for me and my questions. Lindsay, do you have anything else that you know about?
All right, well, I'll just agree on Mark. I didn't have it happen naturally, but I've goosed it with a BookBub ad where I've had like a box set I put out at $9.99 and was selling nothing, you know, and then you get the BookBub ad and drop it to 99 cents. And I've had something stick in the top 200 at Amazon for like 4 months after that. So in my case, it wasn't natural, but you can definitely revive a book where the sales have not been doing anything special. All right, final thing here. Oh, I did want to ask, Chris, are you going to launch at 99 cents, or now that you have a military sci-fi fan base built up, are you going to launch at full price?
I'm going to launch at 99 cents just because I waited as long as I did between books. So my last science fiction novel came out in September. Had I been, a little smarter about it and put out the book sooner, I probably wouldn't have felt the need to reduce the price. But for at least the first week, I'm going to do 99 cents on the first book.
All right, cool. I'm planning to do that too. Hopefully not leave it at 99 cents for 8 months this time. But last time it was selling so well that I was like, why would I mess with it? They can buy the other books at full price.
I try messing with it. If you raise it to $2.99, see if you see a difference in sales. And I suspect you probably won't see much of one.
Well, we'll see. This time, if I'm not too cowardly, I'll bump up the price after 2 weeks. All right. Well, I do want to say, since I forgot earlier, I looked you up. Jaden Hunter was our lit RPG guy back on episode 114. So if you guys are curious about that, you can check it out. It is a long show, so just to warn you. All right. Chris, thanks for joining us tonight. Why don't you, we've kind of talked about what you're up to next, but is there anything you'd like to plug or anything people should check out?
Just take a look at the 12 Weeks to a Trilogy if you are an author. I do this sort of thing because I really enjoy helping the community. There's no ads. There's no need to sign up for a mailing list or anything. It's just some videos that are going to show you my Scrivener and what I'm doing to write this trilogy, because there's a lot of new authors there unsure kind of how to proceed. They'd like to write a book. This shows you how it's being done. You get to see somebody doing it in real time. You're seeing the world building and the plotting. But if you do go watch the videos, don't think that it's necessary for you to write as fast as somebody like Lindsay or myself. Everybody is going to get there eventually if they keep after it. But if you're writing a book a year right now, that's just fine. Whatever you can get out is just fine, especially if you've got a full-time job. Just try to get as optimized in your process as you can.
All right, sounds good. And you've got those up at chrisfoxwrites.com, correct?
I do. Mm-hmm.
All right, I will put a link in the show notes. We are up to episode 127. So if you guys need links for anything, come on by marketingsff.com, or you can leave comments for Chris or comments for us. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to everyone who popped in live tonight to watch on YouTube. Just in case you're curious and want to try that, we usually record on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern, or 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and wherever the people in the middle are. Thank you for joining us tonight, Chris, and thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for talking with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
So long, everybody.